Good evening and welcome to the State of Scottish Football. It's Wednesday evening and it's just the two of us tonight. It's myself, Mr. David Smith. We've also got the magnificent looking Mr. Jack Donnelly. Jack, how are we doing this evening?
I appreciate that. That's a lovely introduction, David. I'm doing very well. It's a glorious day down here on the West Coast. The sun's shining. I'm in a good mood and I'm ready to talk about some Scottish football with your good self.
Fantastic. We need to start with the coronavirus, unfortunately, with the news coming out today that Rangers have players that are self-isolating or players that have picked up the virus with players such as James Tavernier, Al McGregor, John McLaughlin, Calvin Bassey, Ryan Kent and Scott Wright. Now, it must be clarified here that it's unsure with regards to whether each of these players are having to self-isolate, because there's various talk about with regards to Ryan Kent in particular being injured and not just flying over. But Jack, with that news on top of Steven Gerrard and Mike Beale not travelling to Armenia, it's sad news for Rangers.
Oh no, it's absolutely devastating news for them, especially not even just with this game, but the weekend that they've got ahead of them with the first Old Firm of the season. It really couldn't have come at a worse time because we all know how important this game is tomorrow night for Rangers away in Armenia. I mean, there's already been discussions about unrest after not being able to qualify for the Champions League. So if having a weekend squad going into such an important game for Europa League qualification, it's really, really dangerous and it's going to cause a lot of concern for tomorrow night. But fingers crossed that Rangers can still get the job done. As I've always said, I've got no allegiance to either Old Firm side, and all I want to see is a Scottish team do well in Europe for coefficient's sake, so we can have more Scottish teams competing on the continent rather. So hopefully it's not a terrible loss for Rangers, and hopefully they can get some sort of result tomorrow regardless.
Is professionalism the big term here when it comes to Rangers' trip to Armenia at 4:45 tomorrow afternoon?
Yeah, I think professionalism is going to be absolutely massive because there's a lot of players coming in that might not have really thought that this was going to be their chance, especially in such a big stage in the Europa League. They might have just been hoping for potentially Scottish Cup games later down the line or something else, being through the Challenge Cup with Rangers B or something like that. I'm not sure. But there's a lot of young players in there. I noticed that Stephen Kelly's in the travelling squad, and I'm a massive, massive fan of his. He was excellent on loan at Ayr a couple of seasons ago. He was a real game changer, and hopefully he might get a wee bit of time in midfield tomorrow night. And really, really good opportunity for a lot of these Rangers players, these younger guys, to go away and have make a night to remember, because if they can go on put in a performance that gets them through to Europe, they're going to be revered for the reserve heroes that were able to come in and do the job when the starters were sidelined.
Obviously, we've touched upon the fact that Steven Gerrard and Mike Beale are not going to be travelling to Armenia, and Gary McAllister's taking the team tomorrow night. He's obviously not addressed the media yet at the time of recording. He will be at 7 p.m. this evening, UK time. Obviously, there'll be a lot to come out of that press conference with McAllister, which happens in an hour. But for McAllister, nothing really changes, does it?
No, I wouldn't say so, David. I think the thing is, if this was coming, he'll have had those conversations with Steven Gerrard about the task at hand. So he'll know how to lead the team out, how to best prepare them. And I think it's really just he'll want to be conveying information as to what's actually happening. I think that's what a lot of people will be tuning into the press conference for, is his information, his insight, and the facts that he knows that no one else will about the current situation, because he might be able to come out and put a lot of fans' minds at rest, or just confirm some things that confirm suspicions that might already be floating around the kind of footballing stratosphere up here in Scotland as to who's out with coronavirus, who's out with injury. So I think it's going to be a kind of cleaning house press conference rather than just a pure match press conference, because obviously they'll be talking about the match at hand, but I think a lot of people will be tuning in solely for those kind of administrative reasons of who's going to be available and who's going to be out for a prolonged period of time.
On the park, is it about players putting themselves in a shop window, such as your Stephen Kelly's and various other young players?
I think potentially, maybe not the shop window, but maybe the it's not really the same thing, but a loan window, if that's such a phrase, because it's definitely like Stephen Kelly, and I think a player like the young boy Lyle on the travelling squad as well, if he is to go from the graphic I saw. This is a real opportunity for them to go out and show that they can compete at this level, and that they deserve to be playing regular football. I mean, I was a bit upset that Stephen Kelly didn't get the greatest amount of playing time last season on loan at Ross County. He wasn't used to his full pedigree, I don't think. But it's definitely an opportunity for him to kick on and really show that he deserves to be playing, whether that's at Rangers or whether that's somewhere else in the Premiership. And I could definitely see if he puts in a good performance and the rest of the youngsters put in a good performance tomorrow night, there potentially could be suitors in the top division in Scotland and potentially just a level below in the Championship that could be coming knocking at Rangers' door before the transfer window closes next week.
Of course, we're live on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and anywhere you can get us
everywhere.
on.
We're all over the place.
Yes, I forgot to mention at the top of the show, and many thanks for the many comments that are coming in with regards to wishing us all the best and a very good evening to you all. On the park, obviously Nathan Patterson's done very well and got probably a deserved place in the Scotland squad based on his performances for Rangers, and this is an opportunity for him to go and show that he's capable of playing on the bigger stage, considering he'll be one of the, what you could say, more senior players tomorrow night.
And it's weird to say that he's going to be one of the more senior players when he's only 19 years of age. It's an odd statement to make, but this is an absolutely fantastic opportunity for Patterson. I mean, you never want to wish any sort of senior player in football illness or malaise in any way, shape or form, but Patterson's really going to be relishing this chance, absolutely, because there's been a lot of questions asked about James Tavernier this season. I mean, I've got a few Rangers friends who have said that he's really not been up to scratch at the start, and they would potentially be having the faith in Patterson more than they would Tavernier based on the start of the season. So this could really be an opportunity for Patterson to go out and demand more minutes from Steven Gerrard, because there have been those links away down south, and I'd imagine there would be a number of other clubs potentially interested in the young player. And I'm not saying for a second that he's looking to leave the club. I mean, he's a Rangers fan himself and he's come through the club through the academy. But if things do go well tomorrow and you still see Tavernier being prioritised over the development of a Scotland international and who we're predicting to be our starting right back for many years to come, then this could really be a statement to Steven Gerrard that he really needs to be affording Nathan Patterson more minutes if he does go out and put on a show tomorrow night, of course.
Absolutely. And with regards to, obviously, tomorrow night, is it about seeing the game through? Obviously, a good 1-0 win over Alderskirk last Thursday. A bit of a disappointment not to score more goals, but it was a good 1-0 win last week. And heading tomorrow will be about being professional, leaning at Old Firm, clashing Sunday lunchtime.
I think, yeah, it definitely is about the professionalism. I don't think you would want to go out and bust a gut for this game. You just want to go out, see it out, to be honest, because I can't imagine a trip over to Armenia is going to do anything for the players' kind of approach to this game. I think it's going to be a bit of a difficult game. I don't really know an awful lot, if anything at all, about Armenian football and what it can bring, but it's the travel involved, of course, and the players might be feeling the effects of that, especially if a lot of these younger players are kind of facing the first massive trip of their careers, of course. So I think it really is just being able to hold on to what you've got, try and score a goal early, and then Alderskirk need to score two. And I think if the defence can hold firm, then obviously away goals don't matter as such. So even if Alderskirk only score one, they're still going to be taken to extra time, and then Rangers can still get a good result from a 1-0 or a 2-1 win or so. So I could definitely see a more reserved approach, but you kind of have to balance it because you've got a lot of young players that are going to want to go out and make an impression, but it's just in what sense they do that, whether it is in more of a defensive reserve style of play or whether they're going out looking for goals early on, because they do have players still in that squad that do have a lot of attacking capability. So it really just depends on what the agreement's been between Gary McAllister and Steven Gerrard on how best to approach this game. I would probably be leaning to a more reserved approach from this Rangers side, especially a depleted one, but with players potentially keen to get out and get more regular football, they might go at it from the word go. We're yet to see, and we're looking forward to seeing how it plays out.
And it's funny because there was a more, what you could say, a more starting 11 type of approach from Rangers last week in terms of the more senior players in the park, and only 1-0 against Alderskirk, and that was with a poor performance, not exactly playing anywhere to the way they can play. Mm-hmm. And tomorrow night we'll have a more younger contingent to it. And is there an alarming scene when it comes to this tomorrow?
I'm not too sure about that. I mean, it's difficult to say because I feel like these players because they're kind of fresh and because they're getting the opportunity, there's obviously a chance that they might kind of be overcome by the experience of it. I mean, you've kind of seen them play. You've seen players play the occasion, not the match, before in Scotland and wider football as a whole, and it's kind of not yielded positive results to them. But I think what these young players need to go out and do, they need to just stick to the task at hand, approach it like any other game they would have, not be kind of overdone or overshadowed by more senior players. They've got every right to be there, as they've been working towards it for the majority of their careers, of course. So having this opportunity, they need to make sure to grasp it with both hands and make the absolute most of it.
From Armenia to Holland, Celtic go to AZ Alkmaar tomorrow evening. I mean, it was a fantastic performance last Wednesday from Celtic to beat AZ Alkmaar. I mean, there was loads of positives on the park. An early Celtic goal tomorrow night will kill proceedings, I honestly feel.
I think I do agree with you, David. I think Celtic definitely do have the greater attacking pedigree just now. I think we spoke about it in the preview of the first leg. It would have been this time last week or just before. AZ Alkmaar have lost a couple of their kind of biggest attacking threats. Owen Wijndal, the young left back, he's sidelined with injury. I still believe he's going to be out, and he's not back until late August from what I'm seeing on my phone screen just now. And they lost their star striker, Myron Boadu, I do believe. Him and Donny O'Malley confused last week, but it is Boadu that went on to Monaco in Ligue 1. So they've lost a really potent attacking threat in Boadu. And Celtic, on the other hand, have just been absolutely lethal in attack, while the defence might still be culpable at points. As we've seen throughout the season, Starfelt's still to properly settle into life, and they are still looking for defensive reinforcement. They've got bags of attacking quality, and we could definitely see them shut things down from an early goal. And I think an early goal does potentially kill this tie completely.
Loads of comments coming in. I've noticed one from John Campbell saying this Rangers team haven't had the real test. There's a source of agreement with it in there, just based on the fact that Celtic underachieved last season. They just weren't themselves under Neil Lennon. There was also other sides in the league that just weren't up to their usual levels. The fans maybe had a part to play in that, because all the games were behind closed doors. I mean, if I'm right in saying Hamilton got a draw out of them, and there was other teams that got a result out of Rangers as well. But when you look at it, there's maybe a source of agreement when you look at it and say that this Rangers team maybe haven't had the real test yet.
Not in a domestic sense, I would say, David. I mean, obviously they've had their European struggles. I mean, Malmo provided a more than capable test for them earlier this season, and of course they were knocked out in fairly modest fashion of the Europa League last season. I mean, the Slavia Prague game, it was perhaps overshadowed by the disgusting scenes of racism that are directed towards Glenn Kamara, but they were put out by the Czech club in the end. And I think domestically they really haven't come up against too big an opposition. Of course, Celtic were not at the races whatsoever, and that's just common knowledge at this point. So I think coming into this week, it's going to be a test for the club as a whole as to how they overcome this, come these times with the pandemic and the positive cases and the isolation and everything, what have you. And I think this motivated, this fresh-faced attack that Celtic seem to have, really inspired by the electric Kyogo Furuhashi, is really going to provide them with a proper test this Sunday coming.
From a Celtic point of view in Holland tomorrow night, is it about seeing out the game early doors and then try to focus on the big one on Sunday?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, they're obviously not going to be taking this game for granted whatsoever. I mean, it's going to be a noisy stadium over in Holland. I mean, we know how passionate Dutch fans can get about their football, so they're going to be absolutely up for it. And 2-0 is a dangerous scoreline. I mean, you can easily see a 2-0 lead slip more comfortably than you perhaps would like it to. So I think they'll want to go out and they'll be at it from the front foot, I would say. I think they'll be looking for an early goal, as you suggested just when we started our discussion about this game. And I could see them, if they do get that, then they probably will pull back a little bit and protect the 3-goal lead rather than the 2-goal lead. But if Alkmaar do score one early on, I could see them kind of being backs against the wall for the majority of the game, hoping that they don't get another. And if they do, then they'll switch fronts and they'll be really pushing and they'll be kind of throwing everything they've got at the AZ Alkmaar backline. And that could potentially be a bit of a concern in my eyes because of how suspect the defence can be. And I think if they commit too many bodies forward, because we've seen a lot of attacking teams put out from Postecoglou, especially in midfield. Using a very, very forward-thinking midfield, and they don't have that same sense of protection of the back line. So if Alkmaar do end up levelling the tie and Celtic do start pushing forward, I worry that they'll end up playing themselves into a corner and conceding from something really, really preventable. But early goal, see out the game. That's what I think the game plan is going to be for tomorrow night.
Absolutely. I mean, with regards to Celtic, this is probably a big game for Ange Postecoglou in terms of brushing away any small doubters that there maybe was.
I would say so, absolutely. I mean, given what last season was, I think Postecoglou's come in at a really good time and has been able to rejuvenate a lot of the support in the club and himself and the team. And I think being able to secure Europa League group stage football is going to go a long way in securing the support of those who still might be slightly doubtful. Celtic were all right in Europe last season. I mean, they got through the group kind of trudgingly so, I suppose, and then were fairly comfortably dealt with in the knockout stages. So, yeah, getting into the group is going to be massive for Postecoglou and being able to convince any doubters that he's right to be leading the team and he's doing a good job in it so far.
And that's the thing, when you talk about Celtic and the fact that there's all these problems with Eddie Howe and the transition with Postecoglou coming in, you would think we'd get to the end of August with Celtic in European football still.
No, that's the thing. There's a lot of things that we get to the end of August and we didn't think we'd be talking about. I mean, the one thing that I highlighted on yesterday's show, The State of Scottish Football, there's not a person alive a month ago that would have thought they'd be sitting at the end of August and clamouring for Tony Ralston to be included in a Scotland team. You never would have had that on your wildest dreams that would be the case. So it just does seem to be a real air of positivity about Celtic, and that it's very easily comparative to what it was towards the end of the season, where it was a completely toxic atmosphere in and around the club, and the relationship with the fans really seemed to have broken down to little to nothing, if that. So yeah, it's been a really nice turnaround to see from a Celtic perspective, and I'd imagine a lot of Celtic fans, especially those in the comments tonight, are going to be hoping that it continued for a long, long time.
Away from the game tomorrow night, Leo Abada is 59th in the top 100 youngsters in Europe. How impressive have you been with his start to the season?
He's been fantastic. I think he's taken to life at Celtic really well so far. Scored in his debut in I think it was a 1-1 draw that Celtic had in the kind of first qualifying match in Champions League. Yeah. Away to home to Midtjylland, sorry. And then that was kind of overshadowed by the Beaton red card and then losing the goal late on. So I think he's been really, really consistent in his performances. I think he dropped out for a couple of games, came back just as good as he was. And it's something that I didn't realise when he first signed, but I was quickly made aware of the fact he's only 19 years of age. So being able to get into this team and keep out someone like James Forrest, who's been a consistent prong of that Celtic attack for many years, it's massive credit to him. And you could definitely see a lot of Celtic fans getting behind him, and hopefully he becomes the next big thing. For the Glasgow side.
Absolutely, and I mean Celtic have been a club that have been very traditional in terms of bringing in young talent. I mean Tony Ralston's one of them. Kieran Tierney, James Forrest, Carl McGregor. The talent just keeps on growing, and Leo Abada, if he gets in an environment, will probably just grow from strength to strength at Celtic.
No, absolutely. You're bang on with the fact that Celtic are typically good at bringing through young talent. And while Abada may not be one of their own in terms of coming through their academy, he's at that kind of raw, untapped stage of his career where a good stream of regular football is going to do absolute wonders for his future development. So it's going to be really important to see how he's managed, because if Celtic do get European group stage football, it's going to be a long, long season with a lot of games, and Postecoglou is going to need to make sure that all of his squad are fighting fit at every given opportunity. So he needs to make sure not to potentially burn out Abada at an earlier opportunity. So he'll need to potentially sacrifice him and bring Forrest back in for some occasions. But I don't think a player like Abada, who's only coming in at 19, will have too many complaints. I think even couldn't have expected the start that he's had. And he seems to be getting right into the way of life. He seems to be really kind of one of the most supportive players in the group. I mean, there's been a lot of stuff on Twitter. You're seeing him commenting on his teammates' Instagram pages, getting proper support for his teammates. So he seems like a really good character to have in that Celtic team when it's kind of mission rebuild at the moment for Celtic. And I think he's a really good cog in that current Celtic machine.
John's been fairly proactive in the comments this evening, and he's came out saying there are still issues with the Celtic defence, and that's probably 100% correct, just in terms of, Celtic are doing very well in terms of winning games of football, but there's still one or two things to go work on.
There absolutely is. I mean, I'll be interested to see what happens when Christopher Julian comes back from his long-term injury and see how he slots back into the fore, whether he does at all, because I think Stephen Welsh has been excellent so far as he's kind of started in alongside, it was Beaton before Starfelt came in, and he's earned himself a call-up for the under-21. Some people potentially suggesting that he should be included in the senior squad, but maybe a bit too early for that, considering he's only kind of played this season and a little bit of last season in terms of senior football. But the right-back issue was one that was really concerning for a lot of Celtic fans coming into this season. They seem to have rectified that with the signing of Josip Juranovic from Serbia or Croatia, one of the two. Wherever he was, that the kind of far east of Europe. So I can't remember exactly what it was. Hope the comments can forgive me for that one. But he does look to be a really good player coming in, and you would imagine that he's going to be taking that starting role at right back off of Tony Ralston, which potentially could be a bit harsh considering that Ralston's been a pretty solid player. And in terms of an attacking output for Celtic so far, as an inverted fullback, as Postecoglou's loved playing, he's done really well. And I suppose Juranovic is there for that more defensive, a solid defensive contribution, which, considering their frailties, is going to be massively important, especially for a game like this Sunday's Old Firm.
Ending on the Celtic chat with Joe Hart, and he's had a good start to his tenure at Celtic, and he's probably added a lot of stability to his Celtic backline.
Yeah, no, absolutely. There were a lot of doubts about Hart coming in, and I think rightly so, when he's not really played regular football for kind of 2 years or so, and kind of the age factoring into it, and whether he was still a player he once was when he was winning titles with Manchester City. But he's really come in, he's cemented himself as a leader. There's been a couple earlier for a couple of goals earlier in the Celtic career. I think the 4-2 game away at Jablonec, there were a couple that fans were potentially calling him to come into a bit of better light for, but I think he's dealt with that really well. He's been able to kind of compose things and calm things down, and kind of his leadership qualities are definitely what can spur Celtic on, because if you've got McGregor marshalling things from midfield forward, you've got Hart in goal, making sure the defence is playing to the maximum capacity. So I think he's dealt with the pressure well, and I'd imagine he'll be right up for this game tomorrow night, and of course Sunday's big game as well.
Back in Scotland, and we go to the Grant City, where Aberdeen host Quarterback tomorrow evening. Quarterbag tomorrow evening, should I say? Quarterback. Big game for Aberdeen tomorrow night, Jack. Just in terms of seeing if Aberdeen can have progressed under Stephen Glass, because I mean it's been a positive start from an Aberdeen point of view, but there's many boxes still to be ticked with regards to improvement and also progression. And Aberdeen fans were up with the news today that Andy Constein will be out till Christmas time with injury because of that bogged pitch across in Azerbaijan last week.
Yeah, that's really something that Stephen Glass could have been doing without. I mean, I know a lot of people were kind of first introduced to Considine from his involvement in Scotland towards the end of the Euro 2020 qualifying campaign, and of course his involvement in making Yes or I Can Boogie the unofficial national anthem of the country. But he's been a solid player for Aberdeen for a number of years, and I think losing him to a preventable injury, if just the ground was kept up to a kind of decent standard in Azerbaijan, I think it's something that Stephen Glass would have really loved to have avoided, because he's he's a real leader in that Aberdeen squad. And I think although he kind of taken steps to bring some more leaders in over the summer, I mean, of course, Declan Gallagher and Scott Brown coming in, he almost kind of limits Glass's tactical manoeuvrability, because you saw them play three at the back in Azerbaijan with Considine on the left, Gallagher in the middle, and McCrory on the right of a back three. And that kind of limits that option, and he'll probably have to revert to a back four tomorrow night, which, given players like Calvin Ramsey have started really well, Jack McKenzie on the opposite flank, that's probably going to be really good for them, a really good chance for them to make even more of a name for themselves. Ramsey especially has been excellent since starting properly this season, and I feel like it's going to be a big statement. They'll have the noise of the Pittodrie crowd, and they'll have a proper pitch that they can play on, so hopefully things do go well for the Dons tomorrow night.
There's enough to be optimistic upon reflection for Aberdeen fans based on how last week panned out. I mean, it was a bogging pitch, as I touched upon earlier, and also the fact that it was only 1-0. What need to be positive about tomorrow night's game for Aberdeen fans?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, they've done really well in Scotland this season. Of course, they're unbeaten in the league. And I think there were a number of kind of circumstances, losing Constantine the pitch, that really made their trip to Azerbaijan worse than it possibly could have been. But I think Aberdeen fans should be absolutely positive. They were able to maintain it just a one goal deficit, so they can absolutely claw that back, especially with the attacking form they've been in. They've been really good at getting forward and scoring goals. Christian Ramirez has done really well since coming in from America, the 30-year-old. And I feel like there's absolutely every chance that we could see a really good Aberdeen performance tomorrow night, and we hope they do for coefficient reasons, of course.
Obviously, Constantine has played 550 games for Aberdeen, which absolutely is quite incredible. And there's been a lot of talk with regards to David Bates coming into Aberdeen, and he's also been linked with Hearts. David Bates looking at a return to Scotland. What would you think of that, Jack?
It's an interesting one. I don't think things have gone particularly well for him over in Germany. He had an odd inclusion in a Scotland squad, I think I'm remembering rightly, and he didn't exactly cover himself in too much glory, and he's not really had a look in since. So potentially getting that move back over to his homeland could stand him in good stead for a potential future call-up and just being able to kind of reassert himself as a decent centre-back. But I feel like Aberdeen are right to be looking at him, because I wouldn't say McCrory's a centre-back. I think I would much be looking for him to be playing more forward in midfield. And I think other than him, you've potentially got you're a bit light at the back if you're Aberdeen, especially with Considine out, because you've got Gallagher, you've got Jack Garr, and that's kind of it, apart from a couple of the young guys, Michael Devlin, of course. But I feel like it's definitely an area that Aberdeen could use another body in, especially if they are looking to utilise the three at the back, as Stephen Glass did in Azerbaijan last week. And I think a move for Bates could potentially be a fairly competent bit of business from Aberdeen.
Aberdeen have been busy in the transfer market in the striking department, signing Austin Samuels on loan from Wolves. I mean, have I done my research on this striker? He doesn't really score a lot of goals, but then I was comparing Austin Samuels to Christian Ramirez, and neither of them scored many goals last season. It's a rather unique approach that Stephen Glass is using with regards to his recruitment for some odd reason.
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting to see that. I think it depends on where you want to play Samuels, because something I had to look into myself as well as you did, David, and I do agree he probably wasn't the most prolific. I think it was I'll just double check before I make a fool of myself.
Last season for Bradford.
It was Bradford. That I was trying to think of the club more than the number. So Bradford, he spent a season on loan at last season, and Ramirez, as you said, he wasn't the most prolific last season either. But potentially, Glass is just looking for players that he thinks best suit his system, and the players that are going to suit his style of play best, and that could potentially yield more goals for them. You never know. So, I mean, look, he's a young English guy playing at a Premier League club, or at least he's contracted to a Premier League club. So there's every chance that he could be a really good player one day. So might as well kind of take a chance on him. And if things don't go too well, then there's no real risk of bringing him in permanently at the moment anyway. So I feel like it's a fairly sharp signing. It's one that could kind of add another weapon to Aberdeen's attack and potentially provide even more service for the likes of Ramirez and J. Emmanuel Thomas up front, who I think he's not potentially got off the best goal scoring start, the Jet, but he's done well in kind of establishing himself, in the Aberdeen team. So I'm interested to see the pair of them and Samuels, to see how they contribute to Aberdeen's attack going forward, of course.
The thing with Jet is he plays a lot more deep compared to Samuels and Ramirez, which could be a hindrance, but it could be a real positive at the same time.
It could be, but I suppose it's good that he can kind of come back and win those balls, contest for those balls, and then he'll have the likes of Ramirez and Samuels as runners off him. So if his hold-up play is really good, we've seen that a lot during his time at Aberdeen, and of course Livingston last season. And I think if he can kind of come back, protect the ball, shield the ball, and then lay it off to Ramirez or Samuels with a bit of a pass through the defence to get them clear, then that could be a real source for goals throughout this season for Glass and Aberdeen.
Absolutely. Aberdeen play Quarterback tomorrow night, obviously, at 7:45. On to Perth now, and St Johnstone host it's probably the biggest game in St Johnstone's history. I mean, St Johnstone have started the season okay. They haven't hit the heights of last season yet, but there's probably a lot to take into contention with the fact they are playing Sunday first to Sunday Thursday. A club like St Johnstone, with all due respect, probably, I'm not saying they wouldn't have the players to handle that intensity, but they're probably, as a club, try to handle the pressures of European football, if you understand.
I do indeed, and it's not something they've had to handle before. So I feel like that's potentially a reason as to why we've not seen them pick up a domestic win yet. I mean, the only win that you can kind of count on them in domestic form is being able to pass Arbroath in the League Cup round of 16, and that was only on penalties after extra time where they went behind to the part-time side twice. So it's been a bit of a testing season for Callum Davidson and his side so far, but I suppose the biggest win for them is that a number of their players haven't looked out of place on this stage. I mean, we could wax lyrical about Ali McCann in the midfield until the cows come home, so we won't do that here because we'll be here for ages. But players like him and Jason Kerr has been absolutely fantastic at the back. Sean Rooney, of course. Chris Kane's done quite well in Europe so far. Of course, he got a couple of goals over the two legs against Galatasaray. Sorry, it just completely blanked for the club, and then he scored the opening goal away in Austria last week. So there's a lot that the Saints fans can take away from it, despite a bit of a stuttering start to domestic life. And it kind of feels like we're at this point every week with St Johnstone now, that it is the next biggest game in their history. And considering that this could yield them group stage football, absolutely this is going to be topping the lot. And I'm really going to be excited to see a blistering McDiarmid Park tomorrow night, just cheering their team on from first to final whistle.
Obviously, St Johnstone fans were out in their numbers when they played Galatasaray a fortnight ago. Plenty of chanting, plenty of singing. I watched St Johnstone 10 days ago when they played Arbroath, and there was the same amount of fans that were at that game. Not the same amount of a crowd, and obviously the same fans at the game, but there was plenty of noise, and St Johnstone fans have came out in their numbers over these last few weeks.
No, they absolutely, rightly so. They've completely. I think it's a combination of things. It's a perfect opportunity for them. They're coming out of isolation, coming back into a bit more of a normal way of life, and they're really having potentially the best kind of time they've had following their club. I mean, the cup double, completely unprecedented and historic, but having this European journey has been absolutely fantastic for them, and they'll kind of been gutted not to have had the same access to the away days as they would have done in seasons gone by, but having the opportunity to get to McDiarmid Park for both the second legs. Of course, the last Europa League round was away to Galatasaray in the first leg, so they could bring them back to McDiarmid Park. In the exact same situation, it was 1-1 on aggregate after the first leg against Galatasaray, as it is against LASK tomorrow night, and it's going to be a very, very similar situation. It's going to be a big, big night for St Johnstone, one I'm going to be looking forward to watching on the telly as well, of course.
Obviously, the big Scotland news came out yesterday. Xander Clark in the Scotland squad. I think it's justified based on the performances he's produced both last season and so far this season. Is there maybe a tinge of disappointment though that Jason Kerr and Jamie McCart and Sean Rooney didn't get a mention or indeed in contention for a place in the Scotland squad?
No, I think there definitely is. I mean, Xander Clark, he's done very well, and I do agree with his inclusion, especially considering what's happened with McLaughlin, obviously following the test and the COVID concerns. Marshall's not really had a look in, if anything at all, at Derby, and having Craig Gordon and Liam Kelly there is going to provide some really good competition for Clark. I'd imagine Gordon's going to be the one starting. I'll say that just now. I would back Craig Gordon to start and be Scotland's number one for the next 3 games, but Clark could potentially get a look in against Moldova at home. You would like to think that could be the game that we rotate a bit more for. But in terms of McCart and Kerr coming in, I'm not surprised to see Sean Rooney potentially left out, because I think players like Ralston and Patterson probably deserved a look in a little bit more based on their contributions this season. But I struggle to see how someone like Scott McKenna or Liam Cooper is potentially getting in the squad over a Jason Kerr or a Jamie McCart, because I know there's the argument, Cooper has to be in there as a Premier League captain. He's been rubbish for Leeds this season. Leeds haven't looked anywhere near as defensively flamboyant. I'll probably use the word, because you kind of get two versions of Leeds, don't you? You get the all running, all attacking Leeds that can kind of run a team into the ground, and you get the Leeds just concede 5 a game in the opening day to Man United. I think we've seen a lot more of that Liam Cooper this season, and I feel he really didn't cover himself in glory a lot for playing for Scotland in any of his recent games. So I would have liked to have maybe taken a chance on someone like Kerr, who's been consistent and he's had those all-important moments in the Cup and the league so far. So yeah, a bit disappointed, but I suppose having Kerr and McCart and Rooney at full fitness for what's potentially going to be a historic trip into Europe and kind of salvaging their league season is going to be massively important for Cam Davidson. So I'm not too sure he's going to be pulling his hair out over a lack of inclusion.
Running off the Premiership, we're going to go up to the Highlands, and Ross County have added defender Jack Baldwin. I mean, he used to play for Bristol Rovers and Sunderland. A lot's been made about this signing in terms of he's a ball-winning defender and he's quite good in the air, but a lot's been made about his defensive awareness with regards to a lot of people have described him as a careless player at the back for Ross County, for the various clubs he's played for.
Well, that's not exactly something Ross County are going to be wanting as a player with a bit of a rash challenge in him on a frequent occasion, because I've said it a number of times in this podcast, I don't see anything good about this Ross County side, and I do predict them to finish dead last in the Premiership, and I'd said that before the league even began. But if it's a player that's willing to kind of put his heart and soul on the line for them, it's absolutely someone that's going to endear himself to Ross County fans. He's willing to kind of go out and put in rough challenges when potentially others might not be, and considering the amount of attacks that Ross County are going to be conceding over the course of the season, he's someone that could potentially come in and make a difference in those clinical moments. So he's had, I think, over 100 games for both from Rovers, for Peterborough, 300 appearances plus combined in English football. So he's the fact he's still younger than 30, only 28. That's a fairly good sign that he's had trust in him, placed in him, by a number of different managers around England. So definitely worth having him in the squad, and definitely worth having him as an option for what's potentially the worst defence in the Premiership when you look at it on paper.
Okay, on to women's football tonight. This is the first time I think we've touched upon women's football in the state of Scotland.
In depth, anyway. I think I've tried to mention it a couple of times before, but definitely the first time we've talked about it in its own segment, anyway. So
on Sunday, we're seeing it's the League Cup stage. At the moment, the league kicks off on the 5th of September. The League Cup's seen Aberdeen beat Motherwell thanks to the first half Bale Hutchinson strike. We also had Boroughmuir 0, Queen's Park 3, and we had Hibs 10, still 0. Jack, you were at Tony Macaroni Arena on Sunday. What did you make of Hibs' performance?
It's hard to kind of sum it up, because you see 10-0 and you think it's absolutely blistering. They never really took their foot off the gas. But I think the word I would probably describe it as a professional performance, to be quite honest with you, David. I think there were lulls in the attacking play from Hibs, certainly. I think while they didn't really offer Stirling University any leeway going forward whatsoever, there was very rarely an opportunity that Stirling kind of forayed into the Hibs half. It was more just a case of Hibs recycling possession, sending it back to our back line with Joel Murray, Siobhan Hunter starting together again, and kind of redistributing it back up the pitch. But yeah, when you look at 10 goals and being able to score 10 goals in a match, it's going to be excellent going forward. And they really were clinical throughout, and I was really, really pleased to see that level of performance in our game against a second-tier side, but it's still taking it as seriously as you can, realistically.
Obviously, Hibs are playing Dundee United tonight at 7 o'clock, and we'll get on to tonight's fixture shortly, but it probably says a lot when Hibs are building up that bit of momentum, because they've got a fantastic 4-0 win over Kilmarnock as well.
They did indeed. I was at the Kilmarnock game. I'm sadly not at the Dundee United game. As you can see, I'm still in the, what people have called a submarine and a loft conversion, wherever I'm broadcasting from before. So I'm not unfortunately up at the park watching the girls tonight. But I'm holding out hope for a good win again, a solid performance. I actually wanted to ask you something about this the current situation with Group B, David, because of course Dundee United currently sit top of the group. Having played 2 games and having accumulated a goal difference of plus 17, which is just which is a couple more than Hibs have been able to muster. But of course, one of those games did come in a 10-0 win over for Farmington, who have sadly and unfortunately withdrawn from SWPL competition altogether. But they're set to play Kilmarnock again this weekend, whereas the likes of Hibs have only played the 3 games. So what do you know kind of what the script is with that, whether the Forfar game, the Forfar result's going to be just removed from the equation altogether, or whether it's going to count Dundee United finish top with potentially 4 wins, or do you know any more about that situation?
Well, obviously, Forfar Frampton no more. They're gone as a club, which means, as you've touched upon, Dundee United beat Forfar Frampton by 10 goals to 0. And basically, the Friday after that, the Dundee United game, Forfar Frampton basically folded, not as a club, but they folded the first team, which meant that Dundee United got their 10-0 win, and it meant it was a 4-team league with Dundee United, Hibs, Kilmarnock and Stirling University. So that's why Dundee United are doing so well. It was a 10-0 win, which basically capitulated a football club in Forfar Frampton. Well, not a football club, it capitulated an adult team in Forfar Frampton, first team. So it's probably a big game when you think about it with Dundee United and Hibs tonight, just in the essence of Hibs trying to get show progression through the next round of the SWPL Cup. But I mean, Hibs and Dundee United are 2 fantastic teams, so it makes for a good setting this evening. And I've noticed Kenny Whitson popping up saying the Forfar Frampton result has been scrubbed. Oh, I didn't realise that. Thank you very much, Kenny, for telling us that. But I mean, it's sad at what's happened at Forfar, to be honest. I mean, any club that goes through that, it's sad. I mean, this is predominantly a podcast where Celtic fans are on. The majority of our viewers were Celtic fans, understandably so. But what happened with Rangers a decade ago was sad for the Scottish game. I mean, Rangers have responded very well. But, I mean, when you look at the Old Firm in terms of before the administration process for Rangers, it was competitive, and it still is competitive to this very day. And although there were been a few banter jokes and obviously laughs afloat, it really was a sad situation what happened with Rangers. But we're back to normal now with regards to how Scottish football runs, and maybe Scottish football to a degree was better off without Rangers for a wee spell. But Rangers are back in the top flight, and it's debatable with regards to whether they've picked up 55 trophies or one. I'll leave that to the experts.
That's the probing question. That's a comment that could get a few interesting responses to it, of course.
Yeah. But back onto women's football, and for Hibs, is it a bit of momentum just in the essence of new players have came in and also building on the good victories over Kilmarnock and Stirling?
I think that's what we've got to be looking at, David. I mean, the kind of general feeling is we Hibs want to be competing back up for the kind of Champions League place and back up the top of the division again, amongst the Old Firm clubs in Glasgow City, of course, the long-term rivals in this division. So we're really kind of looking to push our way back up, and being able to get these performances in, and really is building up a good head of steam coming into the opening weekend of the SWPL on the 5th of September. So really looking forward to this season ahead. Hibs have added a lot of good players. Michaela McAloney in midfield has been really good so far, of course, coming in from Spartans, where she spent a number of years and really stood out. The American trio of Alexa Coyle, Tony Malone and Gabby English have kind of settled in. It was the kind of first chance Hibs fans had to see Tony Malone on Sunday, and was really good kind of pressing the ball high up the pitch from midfield. And Alexa Coyle scored 3 goals in 2 games thus far in her Hibs career, so really off to a good start for her. Of course, she only came off the bench against Stirling University and still got 2 goals and could have had more. She had a really good attacking influence on the game. And Gabby English it's a bit hard to judge because she's kept 2 clean sheets, but she's really not had too many shots to save. We've kind of been quite defensively resolute against both Kilmarnock and Stirling University so far. So really excited to see how Hibs do get on this season, and with both myself and our State of Scottish Football colleague Stuart Garvey working with the club throughout the season. You can be assured of our coverage on here, of course, of what's been happening in the Hibs games if no one's getting the chance to see them, of course.
Of course, we're European action at the weekend with Glasgow City beating Vic Shimkent. Yes, that's correct. Glasgow City beating Vic Shimkent by 1-0 with Priscilla Chinchilla netting the winner. Fantastic result for Glasgow City the weekend there, Jack.
No, absolutely. And I'll say it once more, and I'll say it again. Priscilla Chinchilla is easily the best name in Scottish football by far. So that aside, though, she's been a fantastic player in our opening season for Glasgow City last year, and I'd imagine she's going to continue to be one of the best players in the SWPL1 and in Glasgow City's team for the forthcoming season as well. It's massive. It's great to see a Scottish team doing as well in Europe as Glasgow City are, and I know Celtic have unfortunately fallen at the first chance to progress through to the second qualifying round of Champions League fixtures, but things are looking good. Things are looking good for Glasgow City, and I'm happy for Grant Scott because he's a good guy in Scottish football, and he's been left kind of big shoes to fill with Scott Booth heading down to Birmingham City and just standing in interim charge of the 14-time champions. So yeah, things are looking up, and it was a really, really good result for the Glasgow club on Saturday night.
Absolutely. Obviously, tonight we've got Rangers versus Aberdeen, the aforementioned Dundee United versus Hibs, and we've got Stallion against Kilmarnock. And not to mention, because I nearly forgot, we've also got Motherwell against Boroughmuir Thistle. So loads of exciting games to take place this evening. We're going to go to League Two now. A side that picked up their first win in 12 years away from home on Saturday. We had Stirling University pick up a 3-0 win at Stranraer, the first result at Stair Park since January 2009, which they won 8-2 that day. Obviously, Stirling have had a hot and cold season, Jack. There's been a lot said about Stirling's 2 wins in terms of they were clean sheets and 3 goals against the clean sheets and also victories, beg your pardon, against and Stranraer, but also they conceded 3 goals against Kelty and Annan. So a lot to be happy about, but a lot to be questioned about as well, considering the goal difference is currently not with 6 goals and 6 conceded.
I think you need to kind of put it into perspective because I feel like Kelty Hearts are really going to be one of the teams to beat in the division this season. I mean, they've come up from the Lowland League and they've really kind of set the stall out in their pursuit of being able to push through the division as quickly as possible, and they're currently sitting top, undefeated. So potentially not really too much of a surprise to see them lose to the Kelty Hearts, but it was a solid 1-0 win away at Stenhousemuir, and being able to get that kind of bugbear off their shoulders of not being able to win away at Stair Park for what's that going to be 12 years if my maths is 11 years. I'm one off. No, it is 12. No, I'm right. Yeah, so being able to get that kind of bear off their back early doors is pretty good, and I'd imagine they would probably be all right kind of finishing where they are sat just now in 4th place. I mean, they missed out on a playoff place last season just by 2 points, and a season before they finished 6th, just outside the top half of the split. So I'd imagine a 4th place finish is just kind of natural progression for the Beanos, and I imagine they're probably going to be quite happy to finish where they are if the season was to be curtailed as it is just now, where fingers crossed that never happens again and we need to curtail a Scottish season. But if it were to happen, I'd imagine Stirling Albion would be all right with where they finish or where they are sat just now.
Sorry, Jack, we're going to speak about an ex-Kilmarnock player here in Jamie Hamill. I mean, he's taking charge of Stranraer at this precise minute in time, and their side are currently sitting bottom of League Two. It's probably important not to press the panic button just yet for Stranraer.
No, I think you're absolutely right. It is still only Stranraer have only played 3 games in the league season so far in League Two, and it is a small sample size. You can't really be fair to judge anything maybe until kind of 6-7 games in, and then if it's still in a similar position, then it's time to start panicking and going absolutely mental over the situation. But yeah, Stranraer just kind of always seem to be there or thereabouts in the league, don't they? They kind of always apologies for that. Someone going absolutely mental on the road outside the house. Someone clearly celebrating something. Not going to be a Stranraer fan, of course. They've not got an awful lot to celebrate at the moment. But yeah, it's a bit too early doors to be calling for heads yet, but if it does continue in this vein, that could be worrying times for Stranraer.
Back on to Stirling, and they've got players like Robin O'Mar and Dale Carrick. They've got a lot of good attacking abundance in that team. No,
they do indeed. I mean, you've got the likes of Dale Carrick and Dylan Bikey, who have had time at Hearts, of course, when kind of Hearts were in that. I think my good friend and colleague at Energy Sport, Jamie McIntosh, had a good interview with Dale Carrick that I would urge anyone to go and check out and just kind of talk about his success in Edinburgh Derbies and things like that. So it's really good to have an attacker of his pedigree in Kevin Jukovic's side going forward. And I feel like it's definitely Stirling have definitely built something that they're kind of looking to push into the playoff places more regularly and kind of get out of their kind of mid-table obscurity position that they've kind of been languishing in for a couple of seasons at this point. So interesting to see what happens with them going forward for sure.
Stirling play Albion Rovers at the weekend. Obviously, Albion Rovers have been prone to the odd short result, like they beat Hamilton. They did beat Hamilton, but they took Hamilton to penalties.
They did
in the Premier Sports Cup. So Albion Rovers are capable for a result in their day, but this is a terrific opportunity for Stirling Albion to build some momentum now.
No, it absolutely is. I mean, Albion Rovers, of course, were the first team to play Ayr United in the new season and took them to a draw as well, and eventually won on penalties also, which I was quite actually glad I missed that game. But yeah, they've not exactly had the best of fortunes recently. 2-0 win over Edinburgh City on the opening day was decent. I mean, Edinburgh City just kind of seem to have fallen apart under Gary Naismith at the moment. I'm not too sure what's happened there. But then drawn 2-2 with Stenhousemuir, who that was, I believe, Stenny's. Oh, well, one of 2 points that Steny have picked up so far. And then the last two results have been a 3-0 loss to Elgin City and a 1-0 loss to Annan Athletics. So Stirling could kind of catch them at a good opportunity to kind of really get some momentum building. And I think it could be the opposite for Albion Rovers. They'll really be looking to get their form back on side and try to build something and get the momentum back going into the rest of the League Two season.
We touched upon the horrible coronavirus virus that's at the top of the show, and unfortunately for Ayr United, they've had to bear the brunt of the virus at this precise moment in time, with 6 players tested positive and a large number of people having to self-isolate, and news coming out in the last hour that they've requested postponement of the Raith Rovers game at the weekend. Jack, how worrying is the situation at Ayr United at the moment?
I think there's always a worrying situation going on at Ayr United, David. That's just part and parcel of being an Ayr United fan. There's always something you're worrying about. But no, this is massively concerning, of course. Taking on Raith at home this weekend, it would have kind of provided a good opportunity to get a result, because Raith are in a very similar situation to us at the moment. They've not had the greatest start to this championship season. They're really not kind of performing to the level that they once were, or they were last season anyway, where they got through to the playoff final, the second part of the playoff final anyway. But it's been interesting to see kind of how they've kind of fallen away, and I think potentially a blessing in disguise that they've had to get the Fife Derby rescheduled, because I'd imagine Dunfermline really would have been going out to put on a show and try and get their season underway, because it's been a bit of a troubling time for the other Fife club as well. So, but for an United perspective, last weekend where we went up to Inverness, Cali Thistle were on the receiving end of a 1-0 defeat, and we went up without a left back because both James Maxwell and Paddy Redding were unfortunately out with coronavirus concerns, and ended up playing. Who played left back that day? Sean McGinty, who, he's Sean McGinty, all right, absolutely. He's definitely the Morton player that we knew we were signing. But no, massively concerning, because it's a really kind of troubling time for Ayr United at the moment. Yet to pick up a league win, only got the 1 point after the 2-2 draw with Arbroath at Somerset Park, and really something we could have been doing it without at this moment in time. The
thing with Ayr is they've become a club in the last few years that have been at the bottom end of the championship, and David Hopkin came in, got off to a great start, but it's kind of dwindled down ever since. And but from an Ayr perspective, is it about pressing the reset button?
I think that's what a lot of people were expecting when David Hopkin came in and took over the reins from Mark Kerr. When he did, they were fully expecting him to get to the summer, and if he did sign on for the season, which he has done, they were expecting a complete rebuild. And a lot of players have come in. He's taken the best part of Morton in their defence from last season, bringing in Fjortoft, McGinty and McAdams, while also adding Cameron Salkeld in the midfield / attack, wherever he fits in. And there's been a number of other players. I mean, Jonathan Afalabi's come in on loan from Celtic, and Tomi Adeloye after a spell in Barnet and a spell with East Kilbride. I think he played 4 games, scored twice before their season was curtailed at the beginning of 2021. So a player that's had a taste of Scottish experience, and he's kind of looked pretty okay since coming in up front. But I think for the moment, it's just being able to try and get results on the board, because in our last 2 games against Inverness and in the League Cup round 16 against Dundee United at home. We've played well. We've played some good football, and I think we felt really hard done by to be knocked out by Dundee United on penalties after we were granted a fairly contentious penalty and subsequent red card to Jack Baird in that game, as we kind of looked to put the sword to the Arabs late on. But we need to start turning those performances into results now. I mean, it took the kind of second half for us to get going against Arbroath when we fully expect them to kind of be down there with us, but they're currently sat fourth, which has been great to see for Dick Campbell, because I'm a big fan of his and what he's been able to do with Arbroath, constantly kind of punching above their weight. But yeah, for now, we just need to start getting results on the board, David, if we are to stand any chance of actually staying in this division for another season.
The thing is, and you touched upon that Dundee United game there, Dundee United have made a terrific start to the season, with probably the only stumbling block being that Pittodrie defeat in the opening day of the week season. I mean, Dundee United have made a great start. For Ayr to take Dundee United to penalties, it probably softens the wound, considering Dundee United have started the season very well.
I suppose when you look at it on paper, it definitely could be a case of softening that blow of being dumped out. But I think having actually been the better team for the majority of 80 minutes, then going a man down, conceding a penalty that Nicky Clark scored, and then going through half an hour of extra time where you barely really got a kick, kind of makes you annoyed that you were even dumped out in the first place. You really could have seen Ayr getting through, be it by one goal or maybe a second, before the penalty ended up being awarded and Jack Baird was sent off. But positives to take away from a good showing, and again, I suppose there were some players that did all right against Inverness, but we just really need to start getting results on the board now. I mean, go any longer without a win and it really could be panic stations. But I already said it's a small sample size, but it's different when it's your own club, I suppose.
The Fife derby, we're going to concentrate on Raith Rovers just briefly before we finish here. Raith Rovers got their Fife derby called off against Dunfermline on Friday night. It looked embarrassing, but Raith Rovers came out on Monday and came out and said what they had to say. And you kind of understand their side of the fence. But from a Raith Rovers point of view, if this Ayr game gets called off on Saturday, that'll be 20 days since Raith Rovers have played a game. And that's probably frustrating within itself for John McGlynn's side.
I think absolutely, but I'm not entirely convinced that it will be called off, because you saw Falkirk be hit by a number of positive coronavirus cases and their squad completely depleted towards the end of their Premier Sports Cup campaign in the group stage. I mean, we were awarded a 3-0 win for a game that I was meant to be going to. I'd booked a ticket to go and see Falkirk at home, but of course the game was called off, and their game against Hamilton was as well, I believe. And they requested postponement, but the SPFL denied them. I suppose it's a bit of a different story now because it's a league fixture, and that might be a different case altogether. But I think if you're absolutely a Raith Rovers fan, you're hoping that this game does go ahead, because there's one thing being physically fit, it's another thing being match fit. You want to be as switched on coming into a championship season as you possibly can be, considering it's such a wild and unpredictable league that anyone can really beat anyone. But falling away from the pace a little bit and not having that opportunity to play matches regularly, especially early in the season, could really be damaging, especially when later down the line you could have a flurry of matches to catch up on. So I think from a Wraith perspective, they're really going to want to see this Ayr United game go ahead at the weekend.
Away from Raith Rovers for a minute, I noticed obviously Forest Green Rovers played Brentford last night in the Carabao Cup, and I'm noticing that Regan Hendry had a pass percentage. I might be wrong here. I think it was 87.5%. He's a quality player.
He really is. I think he's definitely earned that move down to England, and he really seems to have kicked on since joining Forest Green. I mean, it's not just that performance against Brentford, which should be admired in itself. I mean, Brentford newly promoted to the Premier League. I've captured a lot of attention with their opening day win against Arsenal and a fairly decent 0-0 draw with Crystal Palace. I mean, being able to put in a pretty impressive performance against a Premier League side, should be an impressive accolade in itself. But the fact that he's been doing it consistently across the season so far for Forest Green is something to be admired. And he's definitely a player that Raith Rovers have missed this season so far. He was absolutely outstanding for them last season, and I think they could definitely do with a player of his calibre going forward this season.
I've noticed Daniel MC on the comments asking which team I support. I'm an Aberdeen fan. So please don't slaughter me before the end of the show. I've also noticed that I've got a look about that reflection, I'm hurting a bit myself. I don't know if I could take that as a compliment or one, but
I've
been described as lost. So
be prepared. You're going to get a lot of comparisons on this show. That's the nature of the game. That is the absolute nature of the game on this show. It's all in good fun, though. It's all in good jest. I've been called a lot worse than you have so far, David. So don't you worry. I've had Susan Boyle comments thrown about, so I don't really know how to take that. But you just need to take it on the chin and accept it. It's all part of the game. It's all part of the fun.
Yeah, Daniel, I don't know if you'll notice, but I've got a ticket for the Quarterback game tomorrow night, so I'm looking forward to seeing Bruni do very well. All the best to Celtic, Rangers, Aberdeen and St Johnstone in European action tomorrow night. And thanks very much for tuning in. We're almost at the hour stage. Probably by the time we've stopped speaking, we'll be 1-0-0. So I've been David Smith, Jack Donnelly's been on my left-hand side, and we wish you all the very best.